She woke to breathing that wasn't her own, hundreds of tiny inhales rising and falling in perfect unison. The cold dawn light thinned across her ceiling as Lucia Velez blinked awake and froze. 200 wolf pups stood in an unbroken circle around her bed, their silver blue eyes glowing like captured stars. Silent, waiting, judging. A rejected Omega wasn't meant to be chosen for anything, let alone for an omen older than the Frostfang pack itself. Yet here they were, watching her as if they'd been sent for her and her alone. And somewhere deep in the northern mountains, the Alpha King's most sacred test had just begun. Before we go any further, don't just lurk like those pups. Tap like so Lucia knows someone is actually on her side. And hit subscribe, because leaving an Omega alone with 200 sacred pups is cold, even for a wolf. Lucia pushed herself upright, clutching the thin blanket as 200 tiny bodies moved in perfect sync, opening a narrow path toward the door. They weren't here to play. They weren't here to mock her. They were escorting her. The sacred pups, creatures that only appeared during a Luna selection, were guiding a disgraced Omega through the frost-bitten hallways, past warriors who laughed until the pups paused and bowed. Whispers erupted. The elder stepped forward, voice trembling as she announced what should have been impossible. All 200 sacred pups had chosen an Omega, a rejected one, a nobody. And when Lucia lifted her gaze, the Alpha King Duarte Calum was already watching her. Eyes dark, unreadable, ancient, as if he recognized something in her, something even she didn't yet know she carried. If you want to understand why the pups bent to an Omega no one believed in and what the Alpha King sensed the moment she entered his shadow, then don't blink. Hit subscribe now, because what comes next will shock even you. I woke to the sound of breathing that was not my own. Hundreds of tiny inhales and exhales rose and fell in perfect unison, a strange and steady tide filling my cramped Omega room. For a moment, half lost in sleep, I thought it was the pipes again, the old heating groaning through the frost Fangpack house. Then I felt it, the weight of eyes, the press of small bodies, the faint scrape of claws on stone. Cold air slid across my face. I opened my eyes. 200 wolf pups sat in a perfect circle around my narrow bed. They were not tumbling or chewing or yipping the way normal pups did. They were still, each small body perfectly aligned, tails curled neatly around their paws. Their fur ranged from snow white to charcoal, some streaked with odd markings I had never seen in the pack before. But their eyes were what froze my blood. Every pair glowed the same silver blue, bright and unnatural in the dim light, like someone had trapped a night sky full of stars inside their gaze. Sacred pups. My heart slammed so hard against my ribs it hurt. Sacred pups did not belong in the Omega Wing. They appeared in old stories, in ceremonies I had only heard about from behind closed doors. They gathered around future Lunas, around royals, around wolves with destinies that mattered, not around a rejected Omega shoved into what used to be a storage closet. "This is a joke," I whispered, my voice rough. Some warrior thought this would be funny. None of them moved. The nearest pup, a little dark thing with a pale streak over its muzzle, tilted its head as if it understood me. The gesture was too controlled, too aware. A shiver ran through my bare arms. My hand flew to the frayed leather bracelet on my wrist, the last thing my mother had given me before she disappeared. The knot bit into my thumb as I pressed it. For a second, the memory of her voice steadied me. Then the pups moved. 200 tiny bodies rose as one. The circle split, opening a narrow path from my bed to the crooked door. Not one pup broke formation. Not one looked away. They simply turned and waited, the message as clear as any order from an alpha. "Come." "I am not going anywhere with you," I said, though my legs were already trembling. "I am an Omega. I am nothing you want." The path tightened. A pup behind me hopped forward, nudging the frame of my bed hard enough to jolt me. Another bumped my ankle. Soft bodies pressed in from both sides, small but relentless, guiding me toward the edge of the mattress. "Stop," I hissed, grabbing the bedpost. "Stop it." They did not stop. They climbed, a wave of fur and glowing eyes, paws digging into the thin mattress as they pushed against my back and shoulders. One hooked its teeth into the hem of my nightdress and tugged. The pressure of them, the sheer number, left me with a single choice: move or be trampled. My feet hit the icy stone floor. The moment I stood, the pups flowed off the bed and reformed their lines, a living corridor of fur and light leading to the door. I tried to sidestep. The corridor shifted with me. When I backed away, the pups behind me advanced, herding me forward. They were not biting, not snarling, but there was no softness in them, no room for refusal. Breath shallow, I reached for the door handle. 200 silver blue eyes watched as I pulled it open. The cold hallway stretched ahead, empty and echoing. Behind me, a low collective sound rose from the pups. Not quite a growl, not quite a whine, but something old and insistent. I stepped into the corridor. The pups poured after me, reforming their ranks around my legs, pressing at my calves and heels, driving me on. By the time the door swung shut behind us, I was no longer walking by choice. I was being escorted, step by trembling step, deeper into the Frostfang pack house by 200 sacred pups who had come impossibly for me. By the time the pups finished pushing me through the Omega corridors, my legs felt like they did not belong to me. They herded me without teeth or claws, just constant pressure, a nudge at my calf when I slowed, a bump at my heel if I tried to stop. When I dared glance back, all I saw were glowing silver blue eyes and a moving sea of fur, filling the passage from wall to wall. Somewhere between my room and the main hall, I managed to yank on the first dress I could grab from a peg in the corridor, a plain gray thing meant for chores, not ceremonies. My hair hung loose down my back, still sleep-tangled. I had no shoes. The stone bit into my bare feet, each step sending a sting of cold up my legs. The closer we came to the central grounds, the louder the pack became. Voices, dozens at first, then hundreds, rose in overlapping waves, the heavy drum of footsteps, the blare of a horn so deep it vibrated in my chest. As the pups rounded the final corner, the side door to the Frostfang gathering circle loomed ahead, carved with old runes I had only ever seen from a distance. 2 young sentries standing guard snapped to attention when they saw the pups. "Sacred, are those?" one whispered, his voice breaking. The other swallowed hard. "Open it now!" The door groaned as it swung out into blinding white light. Morning lay over the central grounds like a sheet of ice. Frost clung to the stone arches and banners, each one bearing the snarling crest of the Frostfang pack. Wolves packed the tiered stands in thick winter cloaks, their breaths fogging the air in short bursts. At the far end of the circle rose a stone platform for the elders in the visiting court. And lined up before that platform in a perfect row stood 20 elite she-wolves. They were everything I was not. Armor polished to a mirror shine, braids threaded with silver and bone. Some wore ceremonial dresses, cut to show off powerful limbs and proud shoulders. Their wolves hummed under their skin, visible in the way their eyes gleamed and their backs stayed straight. Alphas as daughters, betas as sisters, high-ranking warriors. Every one of them had trained for this moment their entire lives. An excited murmur swept through the crowd at the sight of the pups pouring in. Then the murmur twisted into something else, as it became very clear that the pups were not scattering across the arena or circling the 20 chosen candidates. They were clustered around me. I tried to melt back toward the open door, to disappear behind the nearest column. The pups closed ranks at my stage, forming a tight ring that moved when I moved, that blocked me when I tried to turn away. By the time we reached the center of the circle, I was breathing too fast, heart pounding against my ribs. Elder Maris stepped forward to the edge of the platform, ceremonial cloak trailing behind her. "Today," she called, voice ringing across stone and frost, "by decree of the Alpha King and by the laws of the 5 northern realms, the sacred pups will choose from among Frostfang's finest she-wolves the one most worthy of standing as Luna." A cheer rose from the stands. The she-wolves lifted their chins, shoulders set. One by one they stepped forward, and when Maris spoke their names, each moved deliberate and confident. The rule was simple. When called, the pups would gather around the she-wolf they approved. The more pups drawn to her, the higher her favor. Reyna, daughter of Alpha Hector. The first warrior strode out, muscles flexing beneath her armor, eyes blazing. She flashed the crowd a sharp smile, then knelt gracefully and held out both hands toward the pups. Nothing happened. 200 pups remained where they were, pressed warm and solid against my ankles, my calves, my sides. Not a single one broke away. A ripple of confusion moved through the stands. Perhaps they did not hear, Reyna said tightly, forcing a laugh as she stood. The next name was called, and the next. Each elite she-wolf took her turn, stepping forward into the open space, summoning every bit of allure and of strength and poise she possessed. Some bared their necks to show submission. Others let their eyes flash with dominance, inviting challenge. A few tried to whistle softly, coaxing the pups to play. The pups did not move. If I shifted my weight, they shifted with me. When I tried to inch backward, the ones behind me pressed closer, creating a wall of small, unyielding bodies. "Why are they clinging to her?" someone hissed from the front row. "She is no contender," another scoffed. "She is the rejected one." Heat burned my cheeks. I wanted the ground to open and swallow me. My fingers dug into the fabric of my dress until my knuckles went white. On the platform, Elder Maris's face had gone pale. "This is irregular," she said, but her voice lacked its usual sharpness. She turned as if seeking confirmation from the shadowed figure seated at the center of the high stone chair. But I could not bring myself to look that far. The air there felt heavier, colder. A sharp collective whine rose suddenly from the pups. The sound cut clean through every murmur and whisper. As one, the entire ring of sacred pups stepped away from me. For a heartbeat, I thought they had finally understood, that they would rush to one of the shining she-wolves and make everything normal again. Instead, they turned to face me. 200 silver blue eyes locked on my face. Then in perfect unison, the pups lowered their heads and bent their front legs, small bodies dropping into a bow at my bare feet. Silence crashed over the circle. And Omega stood in the center of the sacred grounds, wearing a plain gray dress and no shoes, while every single sacred pup in the Frostfang pack knelt to her. No one moved. The sound that filled the Frostfang grounds was not cheering or outrage, but the wild rush of my own heartbeat, pounding in my ears as 200 sacred pups knelt at my feet. Somewhere in the stands, someone dropped something that clattered loudly against stone. The sharp noise snapped me out of the frozen haze just enough to realize I was still standing there barefoot, in a plain gray dress, while 20 elite she-wolves watched with their jaws clenched and eyes wide. "This cannot be right," one of them hissed under her breath. "Get her out of the circle," another snapped. "She is spoiling the rite." Elder Maris pulled herself together first. Her hands shook as she lifted her staff and struck its base against the stone platform. The crack echoed through the silence. "Sacred pups," she called, voice wobbling. "You are summoned to judge the candidates of Frostfang's elite. You must choose." The pups raised their heads in the same heartbeat, silver blue eyes blazing, and Maris choked off mid-sentence. The air shifted. I felt it before I saw him. It was as if the circle suddenly tilted. Every gaze in the stands dragged toward a single point above me. The hair on my arms rose. Something thick and heavy rolled through the space, a pressure that made my lungs fight for air. My fingers tightened in my skirt as I forced myself to look up at the raised stone throne in the center of the platform. The Alpha King was standing. He had been a shadow before, seated among elders and dignitaries wrapped in dark furs. Now the light caught him clearly. Taller than any male on the platform, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a cloak the color of a storm cloud. Dark hair brushed the collar of his coat, a few strands caught by the morning breeze. His jaw was hard, mouth set in a line that suggested it had forgotten how to soften. But his eyes were what held me. They were not the silver blue of the pups, but a deep, stormy gray, ringed with a faint glow that made the breath catch in my throat. Those eyes swept the circle once, taking in the bowed pups, the angry she-wolves, the shaken elder. Then they landed on me. Recognition hit his face like a blow. It was only a flicker, a tightening around his eyes, a sharp inhale, the faintest jerk of his chin. But I saw it. For a moment, Duarte Calum, ruler of the 5 northern realms, looked less like an untouchable legend and more like a man seeing something he had never expected to see again. His brows drew together in confusion, like he was searching his memory for where he had seen me before. His gaze flicked to the pups at my feet, then back to my face. Confusion deepened into something else. Wariness. Shock. My chest burned. A strange heat unfurled behind my ribs, spreading slowly outward, as if some invisible thread had snapped taut between us. The noise of the crowd blurred and faded. All I could feel was that pull, steady and undeniable, reaching from his place on the platform down to where I stood in the frost. I did not know this man. I had never left Frostfang territory. Yet something in me leaned toward him, the way tired bones lean toward a fire. It felt wrong and right at the same time, like hearing a song I almost recognized but could not name. Duarte's hand lifted slightly as if to reach for something he could not see, then stopped midway. His jaw clenched. He dragged his eyes away from me to the pups, forcing his expression back under control, but not quickly enough to hide the turmoil there. "The pups have chosen," someone whispered near him. Duarte did not answer immediately. His gaze returned to me once more, slower this time, measuring. There was no simple anger in it, no easy dismissal, only that same uneasy recognition, as if some ancient memory had stirred awake inside him and refused to be silenced. He looked at me like I was a problem he had thought buried long ago. And under his stare, the strange warmth in my chest flared bright, edged with the clouded dawning realization that whatever had just happened in this circle was bigger than a ceremony, bigger than Frostfang, bigger than me. The stone circle did not breathe. I stood in the center of it, dress clinging damply to my legs, bare toes turning numb against the frosted ground. 200 sacred pups still knelt at my feet, heads bowed, silver blue eyes lowered. Thousands of eyes stared down from the stands. Somewhere above, the Alpha King watched me with that storm-gray gaze I could still feel on my skin. My mind kept repeating the same useless thought. This cannot be happening. This cannot be happening. Elder Maris's staff struck the platform again, harder this time. The sharp crack jolted everyone, even the pups. They raised their heads in a slow ripple, fur bristling slightly as she cleared her throat. "The pup's judgment," her voice faltered, then stiffened. "The pup's judgment has spoken." A wave of murmurs crashed through the stands like an incoming tide. "To an Omega? She has no training. This is an insult to the king. Maybe the pups are wrong." At that last suggestion, every hair on my arms rose. The sacred pups turned in perfect unison, fixing their glowing gaze on the section of the stands where the voice had come from. Whoever had spoken shrank back fast. Maris swallowed. "The rites are clear. When the sacred pups appear and kneel, their choice, they chose incorrectly." The voice that cut across hers was low and smooth, but it carried effortlessly through the cold air. My body reacted before my mind caught up, head snapping toward the platform. One of the visiting elders from another northern pack took a step forward, cloak whispering over stone. His hair was almost entirely white, though his shoulders were still broad, his bearing sharp. Deep scars ridged one side of his throat. "With respect, Frostfang," he said, eyes narrowing at the pups clustered around me, "this Omega is not listed in the candidates presented to the Alpha King. She has no lineage worth noting, no rank, no record of service." Heat crawled into my cheeks. Being invisible was bad. Being described out loud as nothing at all was somehow worse. Maris pressed her lips together. "The ancient law does not require rank. Only the pups will." "And yet," the white-haired elder said, turning his head slightly toward the throne, "it is His Majesty's prerogative to accept or reject the outcome of this display." The entire circle seemed to tilt again, attention swinging back to the Alpha King. Duarte Calum had not sat back down. He stood at the center of the platform, cloak hanging heavy from his broad shoulders. Hands relaxed at his sides. Only his eyes moved, sliding from the outspoken elder to the pups, then once more to me. Those eyes pinned me in place. For a long, suspended moment, he said nothing. The silence stretched so far that it started to buzz in my ears. The sacred pups did not fidget. They did not whine. They simply watched him, as if they were waiting too. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, but it threaded through the cold like a promise. The law has stood longer than any of us, he said. We do not bend it because we are surprised by its choice. The white-haired elder's jaw hardened. But, Your Majesty. However, Duarte continued, without raising his tone, a choice does not mean a coronation. His gaze returned to me, steady, unreadable. The rites require trials, he said. Skill, judgment, endurance. The pups have pointed to one contender, nothing more. She will be tested as any Luna candidate should be tested. If she fails, the choice falls void, and we reconsider. He said it calmly, like he was discussing a hunting route, not my life. My stomach twisted. Tested. I had no training. I did not even know what the trials were, Beta. Maris looked like someone had handed her back her staff after threatening to snap it. She nodded quickly, grasping for structure. Yes, yes, Your Majesty. The trials, she repeated, turning to the crowd. The first set begins immediately, as is tradition. All may witness. The trial of wisdom will show whether the pup's chosen understands the responsibilities of Luna. A low murmur of approval followed the words, trial of wisdom. The elite she-wolves, still lined up in their gleaming armor and fine dresses, seemed to inhale as one body. Determination settled over their faces like masks. One of them, Reyna, Alpha Hector's daughter, took an eager step forward. Then we compete, she said. All of us, let the pup chosen stand against those who have studied and trained. A hungry interest sparked in the crowd. This, they understood. Competition, ranking, winning. My hands curled into fists. Duarte's eyes flicked briefly to Reyna, then back to me. No, he said. The word dropped like a stone into a frozen lake. Even the wind seemed to pause. Reyna's confidence fractured. Your Majesty, if the pups were confused. The pups are not confused, he said, and there was iron under the calm now. They chose. We honor that. The trial of wisdom tests their choice, not Frostfang's ambitions. Reyna's cheeks flushed dark. She bowed her head, jaw tight, then stepped back into line. The ground did a strange, slow tilt under my feet. Only me. The crowd's mood shifted again, this time tinged with something sharper. Anticipation, curiosity, a little cruelty. Wolves loved a challenge, but they loved a fall from a great height even more. Maris gave one short, jerky nod. So be it, Lucia Velez, she called, and hearing my full name echo across the grounds made my chest seize. You will face the trial of wisdom before the Alpha King and the assembled packs. My voice had fled, so I could not answer. The sacred pups surged to their feet, shaking off the last of their kneeling posture, and surrounded me. Their bodies brushed my ankles and calves in a living shield as they guided me toward an archway at the side of the circle, where an opening gaped in the stone. I stumbled after them, heart hammering, as the noise of the crowd faded behind us. The air inside the passageway was cooler, quieter. The stone walls narrowed, channeling us into a corridor lit by flickering torches. Shadows danced across the carved symbols on the walls. Old runes of judgment, balance, the weighing of hearts. I had seen them in scratched drawings on Omega bunks, copied by those who wished they were allowed to learn more. Now the symbols seemed to watch me. The pups flowed ahead, their paws making almost no sound. The leader, dark fur with a pale streak over its muzzle, glanced back every few steps, as if checking that I was still following. I do not know anything, I whispered, voice swallowed by the narrow space. You picked the wrong girl. The pup blinked, unimpressed, and trotted on. The corridor opened into a broad chamber with a high, vaulted ceiling and a circular floor marked in concentric rings. More runes lined the walls here, each one set within a stone tablet. Torches burned in sconces between them, filling the space with a warm, wavering glow that did nothing to calm my nerves. In the center of the chamber stood a low stone table carved with a map of the northern realms. Tiny peaks rose where the mountains were, valleys etched into the surface. Silver lines showed rivers and borders. Small metal tokens, shaped like wolf heads, sat clustered in various places on the map. Elder Maris entered from another doorway, flanked by two male elders and a scribe carrying a slate. Moments later, a side door opened, and the Alpha King stepped in. He did not look out of place here among stone and runes and torchlight. If anything, this room seemed to fit him more than the open circle outside. The shadows clung to him, drawn to the lines of his shoulders and the planes of his face. The sacred pups spread around the edges of the chamber, forming a silent ring beyond the last carved circle on the floor. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. "Lucia Valles," Maris said, drawing herself up. "This is the trial of wisdom. It has been used for generations to judge whether a Luna candidate can navigate the politics of the 5 northern realms. You will be given a scenario. You will offer a solution. The elders will judge if your choice is wise enough to stand beside the Alpha King." Her gaze flicked down my plain dress to my bare feet, then back up, and there was doubt in it, sharpened with a hint of hope that I would fail quickly and neatly. "I do not know the laws," I said quietly. There was no point pretending otherwise. "I was never taught the treaties." "That is your burden," one of the male elders said. His hair was iron gray, his nose slightly crooked, as if it had been broken and never quite set right. "A Luna must know what she does not know and still make choices, because the world does not wait while she studies." My mouth went dry. That sounded like a lesson, but it did not feel helpful. Duarte had moved to stand on the far side of the stone map. He rested his hands lightly on the edge, fingers curling around the carved ridges of mountain ranges. His eyes were on me, not unkind but unbearably intent. "Begin," he said. Maris nodded to the crooked-nosed elder. He stepped closer to the table and gestured to the map. "Here," he said, tapping a cluster of wolf head tokens near the northern border, "is Frostfang, strong in winter, rich in ice-silver ore, but with short growing seasons. Here," he moved his hand to the east, "is Ember Peak, smaller in territory, but with warmer valleys and fertile ground." I recognized the names from overheard conversations in the kitchens, from half-finished stories told when alphas were not listening. "Ember Peak has had poor harvests 2 years in a row," the elder continued. "Their food stores are low. Their warriors are proud and will not beg. But rumors say desperate wolves have begun to steal across your borders at night, hunting in Frostfang's forests." He shifted a few tokens, sliding small wolf heads from Ember Peak into the Frostfang area. "Your advisors come to you," he said. "Some urge you to tighten patrols and punish any trespassers harshly to deter future theft. Others argue you should send a shipment of food to Ember Peak to ease their hunger and prevent conflict. You have enough stores to spare some, but not without risk if the winter turns harsher than expected." He looked up at me, brows raised. "As Luna, what do you advise the Alpha King to do?" The chamber seemed to shrink around me. I could feel Duarte's attention like a hand at the back of my neck. The scratched symbols on the walls, the ring of watching pups, the faint scratching of the scribe's slate as he wrote down the scenario, all of it pressed in. I had never sat at a council table. I did not know what the correct answer was. I only knew what hunger felt like. Images flickered in my mind, the Omega storerooms in lean winters, shelves growing barer while the high ranks pretended not to notice, the way we learned to stretch soup with water, to pretend full bellies we did not have. The bitter taste of being told that if we were starving, we should be grateful we still had a pack to starve with. "Harsher patrols will not stop wolves whose pups are already hungry," I heard myself say. My voice sounded small in the big chamber, but steady. "It will just turn them from quiet thieves into angry raiders." The crooked-nosed elder tilted his head, studying me. "And sending food, Bal?" he asked. "You risk Frostfang's security for a pack that has not asked for your help." "They have asked," I said, "just not with words." His brows rose slightly. I swallowed, forcing myself to keep going. "If Ember Peak's wolves are slipping into our forests at night," I said, "it means they are already desperate enough to risk getting caught. Proud wolves do not take that risk until they are thinking more with their stomachs than their heads. If we pretend not to see it, the situation gets worse. If we crack down hard, we give them a new story to tell their pack. Not we are hungry, but Frostfang beats starving wolves. That turns hunger into anger. Anger spreads faster than famine. Silence settled for a breath. The torchlight crackled. So you send food, the elder said slowly, out of mercy. Not mercy, I said, the word too sharp on my tongue. Out of self-interest. Duarte's head tilted a fraction, eyes narrowing, as if I had just stepped somewhere unexpected. I forced my shoulders not to hunch. If we send food openly, I continued, we show strength. We say, we see you, we are not afraid to share. We trust we will survive this winter too. That makes it harder for Ember Peak's leaders to paint Frostfang as an enemy. It gives your warriors fewer reasons to fight and die. But, the elder waited. But we do not send it as a gift they can quietly accept and quietly resent, I said, the pieces starting to arrange themselves in my mind like they did when I sorted supplies in the laundry stores. We tie it to something that lets them keep their pride. We offer them a trade. Trade, the elder echoed. In a harsh season, strength is not only food, I said. You said Ember Peak has warmer valleys. Frostfang's Omega Wing has leaking roofs. The younger wolves cough all winter from damp. Offer them a contract. Food for Ember Peak now, in exchange for Ember Peak builders and lumber in the thaw, to help repair and insulate our lower dwellings. You would involve Omegas in the bargain? Maris asked sharply. Yes, I said, lifting my chin a little before I could remind myself not to. They are the ones who freeze in those rooms. They will know what needs fixing. And if Ember Peak wolves come to work on Omega quarters, both packs' lowest ranks will talk to each other. They will understand the others are just as tired, just as hungry, just as hopeful for their pups. That makes it harder for anyone to turn them into an enemy later. The crooked-nosed elder's gaze had grown thoughtful. The scribe's stylus scratched faster. And the risk to Frostfang's own stores? He asked. Suppose you misjudge the weather. Suppose the winter bites deeper. You sent food away. Your wolves suffer. I thought of half-empty bowls, of the way Omegas learned to eat slowly so their stomachs would not cramp, of the way, some nights, we left more than half the stew to the youngest because they needed it more. If Ember Peak starves, Frostfang suffers anyway, I sighed quietly. Because a starving ally is a dangerous neighbor. Because word spreads that Frostfang watched and did nothing. Cuts corners now and you pay in blood later. I folded my hands together to keep them from shaking. If we share and winter is gentle, I went on, the pack remembers that the king was generous in hard times. They feel safer. They work harder. If we share and winter is cruel, Frostfang still remembers that we did not become monsters to survive. The words surprised me as they left my mouth. I had not known I was going to say them until they were already hanging in the air. The crooked-nosed elder stared at me for a long breath, then another. Finally, he stepped back from the table, lips pressed into something that was not quite a frown, not quite a smile. Interesting, he said. Not precise, not calculated in numbers. He glanced at the scribe's slate. But interesting. My heart sank. Interesting was what people called a broken plate before they threw it away. Maris cleared her throat. We will confer, she said, motioning the elders toward a corner of the chamber. They moved together, heads dipping close, voices low. I tried not to listen, but some words slipped through anyway. Too soft. Thinks like an Omega, unsurprisingly. And yet, Duarte had not joined them fully. He stood slightly apart, still by the edge of the map. His eyes were on the carved mountains, but I could feel his attention flickering back to me like a tongue testing a tooth. The sacred pups had not sat down. They remained alert in their ring, ears pricked, watching every small movement. I breathed slowly, counting in my head to steady the trembling in my ribs. I told myself that if I failed, nothing changed. I had been nothing yesterday. I could go back to being nothing. I ignored the sharp twist in my chest that insisted something had already changed, whether I passed this trial or not. The elders broke their cluster. Maris returned to the table, smoothing down her cloak as if it had tried to wriggle away. The trial of wisdom is not a child's puzzle, she said. It concerns the fates of packs, the balance of power, the laws and treaties we have sworn to uphold. Her eyes dug into mine, searching for cracks. You did not quote a single law, she went on. You did not refer to the Ember Peak Accords of the last summit, or to the expectations of tribute from lesser packs. My fingers curled tighter, nails denting my skin. I kept my mouth closed over the words I wanted to throw back. That no one had ever let me see those accords. That Omegas heard of treaties when someone needed an excuse to feed us less. Instead, Mara said, you spoke of hunger, pride, stories. The word stories sounded like an accusation. My throat ached, but I forced myself to meet her gaze. Those are what wolves bleed for, I said before I could stop myself. Not parchment. Her nostrils flared, and for a heartbeat I thought I had finally snapped something fragile. Then a deeper voice slid between us. She is not wrong, Duarte said. He stepped away from the table, coming to stand beside Maris. Up close, his presence felt heavier, like standing too near a cliff edge with a storm climbing up the rocks below. I kept my eyes on a point slightly above his shoulder, afraid that if I looked directly at him, that strange pulling warmth in my chest would surge again. In the war, he said, voice still quiet but carrying, packs did not take up arms because someone misread a treaty. They fought because they believed a story about who was starving them, who was betraying them, who deserved their rage. Maris dipped her head, frowning. Of course, Your Majesty, but Lucia Valles did not reference the Ember Peak Accords, Duarte continued, ignoring the interruption. But she understood the shape of the problem. She saw that a Luna's council must consider more than what is written. It must consider what wolves feel. He turned his head toward me then, and I felt that gaze again like a touch. You spoke of hunger and pride, he said. You spoke of involving Omegas in repairs, of letting the lowest ranks from both packs see each other as more than rumors. His eyes studied me, searching for something I could not name. That is not ignorance, he said finally. That is perspective. Silence rolled through the room like a slow wave. The crooked-nosed elder cleared his throat. I agree, he said. She did not answer as a scholar of law. But the trial of wisdom does not exist to test memory. It exists to test judgment. He looked at me again, something like reluctant respect in his gaze. Her solution reduces the risk of war, he said. It acknowledges pride. It uses aid as a tool, not a gift tossed to beggars. It strengthens the weakest part of Frostfang's own house. That is more than many training candidates offered in past years. Maris pressed her lips into a thin line. Her eyes darted between Duarte, the elder, and the ring of silent pups. One of the pups, the little gray one with white dusting its ears, gave a sharp, single yip. The sound made everyone glance its way. It stared back, then sat very straight, tail wrapped around its paws like a tiny judge. Duarte's mouth twitched so briefly I might have imagined it. The sacred pups have already shown their opinion, he said, turning back to Maris. What say the elders? The crooked-nosed elder nodded slowly. I say she passes, he said. Barely, he added, but his tone had softened. If she were mine to train, I would bury her in treaty scrolls. But I would not dismiss her. The other male elder hesitated, then gave a curt nod of his own. Wisdom does not always speak in the language of councils, he said. Sometimes it sounds like this. All eyes went to Maris. She stood very still, fingers tightening on her staff. I could see the battle on her face, the pull between tradition and fear, between what she had expected this ceremony to be and what it was becoming. Finally, she exhaled, shoulders sinking a fraction. The elders find that Lucia Valles has shown sufficient judgment for the first trial, she said, each word sounding like it had scraped her throat on the way out. The trial of wisdom is past. The air left my lungs in a shudder. My knees wobbled. For a second, I thought I might simply fold onto the stone floor. Around the chamber, the sacred pups sprang to their feet. Some gave short, pleased barks. A few bounded in a quick, tight circle, as if barely containing their excitement. The little gray one trotted toward me and bumped its head against my shin. You should not be happy, I whispered down at it, voice raw. You just dragged me deeper into something I do not understand. Its eyes glowed up at me, bright and unrepentant. Across the table, Duarte watched the exchange. His expression was unreadable again, that flare of recognition buried under layers of king and duty. But when our gazes met, just for a heartbeat, that invisible thread between us pulled taut again. Something old and unfamiliar stirred in the space behind my ribs. I looked away first. The scribe finished scratching the last note onto his slate. Maris lifted her staff. "The trial of wisdom is concluded," she announced to the chamber. "Lucia Valles, pup chosen of the sacred circle, remains under consideration." The words wrapped around me like a rope and a promise all at once. I had not been trained. I had not studied. I had only spoken from the life I knew. The cramped rooms, the thin soups, the way stories spread faster than truth. Somehow that had been enough to stand in a room with kings and elders and not be immediately swept out with the ashes. For an Omega who had woken this morning thinking only of getting through another day unseen, it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff she had never known existed. The sacred pups gathered close again as the elders began to file out, their bodies a warm tide at my legs. I let my hand drop, fingers brushing over soft fur. "I do not know where this is going," I murmured, more to myself than to them. "But I hope you knew what you were doing when you chose me." The leader pup, the dark one with the pale streak on its muzzle, met my gaze. For a moment in the flicker of torchlight, its eyes seemed almost human in their certainty. Then it turned toward the doorway as if to say, "Come on." I took a breath that did not quite steady me, squared my shoulders as much as I could in a plain gray dress and bare feet, and followed, feeling the weight of unseen futures shift with every step I took across the carved stone. The pups led me back through the torchlit corridor like a tide of fur and warm bodies. My legs still felt a little unsteady from the trial of wisdom. Part of me kept expecting someone to step out of the shadows, say there had been a mistake, send me back to the Omega Wing, and pretend none of this had ever happened. But the runes on the walls were real under my fingertips. The smell of smoke and stone thickened my lungs, and the steady pressure of the pups against my ankles kept me moving. At the end of the passageway, new sounds filtered in, the roar of the gathered pack, distant and restless. The air tasted different here, tinged with snow and breath and a kind of sharp anticipation. Whatever came next, it was for everyone to see. We emerged through a wide arch near the base of the main platform. The central grounds were just as I had left them, yet not. The crowd in the stands had shifted, pressing forward against the stone railings, faces tilted down to peer at the opening where I appeared. The 20 elite she-wolves still stood in their line, armor gleaming, expressions carved into careful masks. Some looked at me with open contempt now, others with a sharper, appraising interest they had not bothered with before. Between them and the platform, the circle's center had changed. A thick wooden post had been rolled in and fixed upright into a socket in the stone. Iron shackles dangled from rings at the top, catching the pale light. Beside it, a lower stool sat empty, its legs spread wide like a crouched animal. The sight of them made the back of my neck prickle. Punishment tools, not ceremonial ones. The sacred pups flowed out around me, fanning into their tight formation without needing any orders. Their presence drew another wave of whispers. Again, someone muttered, "Why are they still with her?" "Because the first trial was not enough," another replied. "They will keep watch." Elder Maris had taken her place at the edge of the platform, staff in hand. To her right sat the elder's semicircle. To her left, on the carved stone throne slightly elevated above the rest, sat Duarte Calum. From here I could see him clearly. The wind had picked up and toyed with the dark strands of his hair, lifting them from his forehead. His cloak lay heavy across his shoulders, pinned at his collarbone by a silver clasp shaped like a crescent and a fang. His expression, carved from some cool stone, gave nothing away, but his eyes followed every step I took. "Lucia Valles," Maris called, her voice ringing across the grounds. "Having completed the trial of wisdom, you now face the trial of empathy." The crowd quieted a little. The words shifted something in the air. Wisdom they respected, even if they doubted I had any. Empathy. That word sat uneasily among wolves who believed in strength first. "The Luna is not only a mind beside the Alpha," Maris went on. "She is a heart at the center of the pack. She must feel suffering. She must understand loyalty. She must know when mercy strengthens the pack and when it endangers us all. Her gaze skimmed my face, searching for fear. She did not need to look long to find it. Duarte's eyes flicked briefly to her, as if to say enough. She dipped her head in response and struck her staff once against the stone. "Bring in the accused," she commanded. A side gate in the circle wall creaked open. Two warriors strode through first, heavy boots thudding across the stone. Between them, shackled at the wrists, walked a young she-wolf with tangled dark hair and a split lip. Chains rattled as they tugged her forward. She was not dressed like a warrior. Her clothes were simple, torn at the shoulder where someone had grabbed her too hard. Dried mud splattered her skirts, and there were bruises blooming across her bare arms. A rough rope belt circled her waist, knotted hastily. She tried to walk with her chin high, but every movement betrayed exhaustion. Her shoulders drooped. Her eyes, a muddy brown, flicked from face to face in the crowd and flinched at each expression she found there. Behind her walked another small figure, hands bound, rope looped to the chain that linked the first woman. A boy, maybe 8 or 9 winters old. His hair, a softer version of her dark curls, stuck to his forehead with sweat. He moved carefully, each step deliberate, as if the ground might shift under him without warning. A cough clawed its way up from his chest and forced itself out, sharp and drawsting. He doubled over with the effort. One of the warriors yanked the rope to jerk him upright. "On your feet, brat," he growled. The boy stumbled, catching himself just before his knees hit the stone. The young woman at the front twisted around, eyes flashing. "Leave him," she snapped hoarsely. "He is not—" A quick jerk of the chain cut her words off. The warrior nearest her slammed his hand against the back of her neck and shoved her toward the post. "Silence, traitor," he said. The word traitor rolled out across the circle like oil. The rumble of the crowd changed. Wolves straightened, eyes narrowing. Even the elite she-wolves along the line shifted, their attention sharp now. Traitors, everyone understood. Traitors were simple. You punish them. I watched the boy cough again, shoulders shuddering, and my stomach knotted. Maris raised her staff, signaling for quiet. "This is Alara," she announced, voice carrying. "Daughter of the late scout Maylor. Last night she was found attempting to flee Frostfang territory with stolen supplies. Food, blankets, medicinal herbs. She planned to cross our borders without permission, to reach a rogue encampment to the east." A hiss slid through the stands. Rogues, wolves without packs, wolves who refused hierarchies and rules. Wolves alphas used as warnings when pups misbehaved. "The law is clear," Maris said. "No one leaves Frostfang to consort with rogues without the alpha's knowledge and consent. No one steals from our stores while our own pups face winter." Her gaze swept over Alara, sharp and unforgiving. "For this betrayal, Alara is branded a traitor," she continued. "By law, she faces public punishment and exile beyond our borders." She turned slightly, gesturing to the boy, who swayed on his feet. "The boy is her younger brother, Nilo," Maris said. "He was found with her, so we must decide his fate as well. He is young enough that his loyalty might still be molded, or he may already share her treacherous heart." The boy flinched at the word treacherous, like it was a physical blow. He tried to straighten, to look defiant, but his body betrayed him. Another cough tore through him, harsher this time. He pressed his bound hands against his chest, as if he could hold himself together by force alone. Something about that gesture, that stubborn attempt to stay upright despite everything, made my throat tighten. Maris's voice cut through the quiet. "Lucia Velez," she said. "The trial of empathy asks you to advise the Alpha King in this matter. You have seen the crime. You see the accused. What should be done?" My mind stuttered. A trial. This was a trial, not just for them, but for me. I looked from Alara's bruised face to Nilo's fever-bright eyes, to the ropes and chains. My first instinct was ugly. They would have never asked me this if I had not passed the trial of wisdom. They were not giving me a chance. They were handing me a blade and waiting to see whether I would use it or pierce myself with it. I forced myself to inhale, slowly. "May I speak to them?" I asked. The request surprised even me. It rippled outward, drawing startled looks. Maris frowned. This is not a gossip circle, Omega, she snapped. You have heard the facts. You know the law. Words change when spoken by different mouths, I said quietly. If it is a trial of empathy, I need to understand what they felt when they did this. There was a beat of hesitation. The elders shifted on their seats. One of them leaned toward Maris, murmuring something I could not catch. She pressed her lips together, then looked toward the throne. Duarte had not taken his eyes off me. For a moment, our gazes held. That strange warmth from earlier flickered in my chest again, like a banked coal catching a gust of air. Let her speak, he said. The words were simple, but they nudged the whole circle in my direction. Maris did not argue again, though the tension in her jaw said she wanted to. Very well, she said. You may ask a few questions, but be swift. Winter does not wait while we coddle traitors. I stepped forward, the pups padding around me. They spread slightly as I moved, their bodies forming a loose boundary that kept me from getting too close to the warriors. But they did not stand between me and Alara. Up close, the bruises on Alara's face were worse. One eye was nearly swollen shut. There was dried blood at the corner of her mouth. Her hands, bound in front of her, were chapped and raw, dirt crusted under her nails. Nilo looked even worse. His skin had a yellow-gray tinge under its natural tone, and his lips were cracked. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cold, and his breath rattled faintly. I stopped a few steps away, lowering my voice so it would not shake too much. Alara, I said. Her good eye snapped to me, wary. I am not your Luna, I said before she could spit anything at me. I am not even sure what I am doing here. But they have asked me to speak, so I will ask you this. Why did you try to leave? She stared at me, mistrust written in every line of her face. Silence stretched. The crowd shifted restlessly. Answer, one of the warriors growled, digging his fingers into her shoulder. Alara hissed in pain, then let out a harsh, bitter laugh. Why, she echoed. Why not? Frostfang had no use for me. My father died scouting during your precious war. My mother followed him into the ground 2 winters later. Nilo coughs blood some nights. The healer says herbs must be saved for warriors wounded in training. There is never enough soup for the Omega quarters as it is. So they told me to be grateful he could still stand. She turned her head toward the stands, voice rising. Grateful, she repeated. Grateful as he choked himself awake every night. Nilo's cheeks flushed with shame and effort. He tried to pull his shoulders back, but another cough cut through the gesture and bent him double again. One of the pups closest to him whined softly in response. The sound made a few wolves in the front row frown. There are other packs, Alara went on, eyes burning. Other ways to live. Rogues who do not hoard everything for the highest ranked. I heard there was a camp in the east where they let seers and healers trade work for medicine. No questions asked about bloodlines. I thought, her voice cracked, I thought if I could just get him there, maybe he would see another spring. Her gaze returned to me, hard and defiant now. I stole to save my brother. If that makes me a traitor, then so be it. The crowd reacted in ripples, some faces twisted, unmoved, hearing only the admission of theft. Others shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting to the thin Omega rows near the back of the stands, where wolves in patched clothing huddled together. I looked at Nilo, at the way his shoulders shook, at the faint rattle in his lungs. I had heard that sound before in dark Omega dormitories, in pups who did not always make it to spring. What would you have done, I asked softly, if you had made it past the border? Begged, she said flatly. Worked, crawled, whatever it took. I did not plan that far ahead. I just knew nowhere could hurt him worse than here. Her words landed like stones in my chest. Maris's voice sliced the air again. You see, she said, projecting. She admits it without shame. She does not regret stealing from the packs that shelters her. She does not regret endangering our borders by seeking out rogues. Sheltered, Alara spat, the word a curse. A warrior jerked the chain hard enough to make her stumble. Maris ignored her. She turned her gaze back to me. You have heard her motives, she said. You see the boy's condition. You know the law. As Luna, potential Luna, you must decide. Punish both as traitors to set a clear example? Spare the boy and remove the corrupting influence of his sister? Or offer mercy, knowing it may weaken the pack's resolve against future theft? All eyes swung back to me. The choice lay bare and ugly between us. It was a test, yet but there was nothing pretend about the stakes. Whatever I said, someone would bleed for it. I thought of the trial of wisdom, of tokens on a map and stories spreading faster than treaties. This was no carved stone. These were two wolves, necks bent under chains, shaking in the cold. I looked at Alara. She met my gaze, jaw set, as if daring me to condemn her. I looked at Nilo. His eyes, hazy with fever, darted between us with a kind of distrustful hope. He did not really believe anyone here would choose him. Then I looked up at the platform, at Duarte. He regarded me steadily, offering no hint, no guiding nod. In his gaze, though, I thought I saw the same question the sacred pups had asked when they circled my bed. Who are you really, when it matters? I exhaled slowly and turned back to Maris. If the law says Alara is a traitor, then she has already been judged, I said quietly. You do not need me to repeat that. A hum rose in the crowd, some wolves nodding as if satisfied. But, I continued, and the word hit the air like a thrown stone, you asked me to show empathy, to understand what she felt, to see if I can be a heart for this pack. So I will say this, calling her a traitor does not erase why she did what she did. It does not erase the boy's coughing lungs. It does not erase the choice Frostfang made when it told them both their suffering was acceptable collateral. Maris's eyes narrowed. Be careful, Omega, she warned. You skirt close to criticizing your own pack. Close, I asked, surprising myself. No, I am criticizing it. Gasps flickered through the stands. The sacred pups, almost as one, edged closer around my legs. There is a difference between a wolf who steals to grow rich, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady, and a wolf who steals because every door inside the pack was shut in her face. If you treat them the same, you tell every desperate wolf watching that their only options are obedience that kills them slowly or rebellion that kills them quickly. And what would you suggest instead? One of the elders demanded. We cannot open our stores to every sad story. We would have nothing left. I'm not saying you should ignore the theft, I said. You cannot, but you can choose how you punish and who you punish. I stepped closer to Nilo. The sacred pups shifted to let me through, their bodies brushing past my calves and ankles. The boy is sick, I said, not treacherous. He followed his sister because she is all he has left, not because he wanted to betray Frostfang. If you exile him, he will die. Slowly here, or faster out there. Either way, the pack loses a life that might have been saved. Maris's mouth tightened. And the sister? She asked. Would you have us embrace her, thank her for stealing from our stores? No, I said. The word was heavy in my mouth. I would have you listen to what her choices are telling you. I looked up at the stands, letting my gaze land deliberately on the section where the Omegas clustered. Their faces were pale, eyes wide. Some looked down when I met their eyes, as if afraid someone would notice. If an Omega believes the only way to save her brother is to run to rogues, I said, it means she has no faith left in her own pack. It means she has asked for help and been ignored so many times that she has stopped asking. That is a failing, Elder, but not just hers. A low growl rumbled from one of the warriors, but Duarte raised a hand and it cut off. My heart hammered. My palms were slick with sweat against the fabric of my dress. I could feel every gaze like a weight. Punish her if you must, I went on, words coming faster now. Make it clear that stealing from the stores and crossing borders without permission cannot be tolerated. But do not call it pure treachery and leave it at that. Call it what it is, desperation that festered because no one thought an Omega's problem was worth solving. Maris's eyes flashed. You propose we, what? Thank her for exposing weakness? I propose you fix the weakness so other wolves do not make the same choice, I said. Publicly, use this moment to tell the pack that there will be a way for Omegas with sick kin to seek aid. A line they can stand in. a petition they can make that is heard before they resort to theft. I turned back to Alara. Her defiance had cracked, just a little. Something like wary hope flickered behind her anger. As for Alara, I said, exile will kill her and teach the pack nothing beyond fear. Fear is easy. You have plenty already. Make her live with what she did instead. Strip her of rank she barely has. Bind her to service that forces her to face the consequences but does not throw her away. I met Maris's stare head on. Assign her to the healer's wing, I said, under watch. Let her scrub floors, wash linens, grind herbs. Let her learn how thin the line is between life and death when there are not enough supplies. She will hate it. She will feel trapped. Good. But she will also see that you are trying to keep her brother alive. Maris stared at me as if I had grown another head. You would place a thief in reach of our medicines? One of the elders demanded. Yes, I said, because if she was willing to steal for him before, she will work twice as hard to earn every dose he gets now. And everyone in the pack will see that you chose a path between cruelty and indulgence. Aluna is supposed to find those paths. The words hung there, fragile and stubborn, at the same time. Nilo swayed where he stood. Up close, I could hear the faint crackle in his chest. Without thinking, I moved, closing the last bit of distance between us. One of the warriors reached out as if to stop me, then froze when 3 pups darted between us, lips peeling back just enough to show tiny white teeth. I knelt in front of the boy, ignoring the collective intake of breath from the crowd. His eyes widened. He tried to pull his bound hands back, but there was nowhere to go. I reached out slowly, letting him see every inch of the movement, and laid my palm lightly against his forehead. Heat burned beneath his skin. He is fevered, I said, looking up at the elders. His lungs are drowning slowly. He needs attention today, not a verdict reserved for the next full moon. You overstep, Maris snapped. You are no healer. No, I agreed, I am not. But any Omega who has held a dying pup knows this heat. You asked me to show empathy, to feel their suffering. I am telling you what I feel. I rose, letting my hand fall back to my side. If you send them out beyond the borders, you will not have justice, I said. You will have 2 fresh ghosts on the edge of the forest, ghosts that will haunt every Omega who hears their story and wonders if she is next. The circle had gone very quiet. Even the elite she-wolves had lost their polished composure, eyes sharp, jaws set. The crowd leaned in, caught in the tension. Some faces were openly angry, others looked troubled, as if I had voiced things they would rather not think about. Duarte finally moved. He stood from his throne, not just straightening, but stepping down 1 level so he was closer to us, closer to the circle. The gesture drew every eye. The trial of empathy is not meant to be comfortable, he said, voice cutting through the cold air. For the candidate or for us. His gaze swept over the Eldadars, the warriors, the stands. We ask whether Aluna can feel beyond her own skin, he said. Whether she can see wolves, not just laws. Whether she can hold the weight of mercy and still understand the cost. He looked at me then. Lucia Velez did not deny the law, he said. She did not excuse the theft. She did not try to pretend that hunger and fear make everything acceptable. He paused as if choosing his next words with care. But she did what many in this circle failed to do, he continued. She looked at the boy and saw a child, not a stain. She looked at the sister and saw desperation, not only betrayal. She held the pack to account for the ways it created its own problems. A low, uneasy murmur rippled through the stands. Maris's mouth was a hard line. Your Majesty, she began, if we allow this kind of softness. Softness, he repeated, and there was something dangerous in the way the word rolled off his tongue. Do you call it soft, Elder? To stand before the entire pack as an Omega and tell them their comforts are paid for in someone else's suffering? Her jaw shut with an audible click. Duarte looked back at me, that strange recognition simmering again in his eyes. Empathy is not weakness, he said. It is a risk. It is choosing to feel more than you have to. He turned to the elders. The candidate has advised, he said. Now you will render judgment on her fitness. Has she shown the heart expected of Aluna? The elders exchanged glances. The crooked-nosed one, who had spoken during the trial of wisdom, exhaled slowly. "She sees too much," he said. "She speaks too plainly. That will make many wolves uncomfortable." His lips twitched. "Which is, perhaps, exactly why she is needed." He raised his head. "I find that she has passed this trial," he said. Another elder, older, hair gone almost entirely white, nodded. "She chose a path that punishes, but does not discard," he said. "That protects a pup who cannot choose his blood. That is empathy tempered, not blind." Their gazes shifted to Maris. She looked like she had swallowed something bitter. Her eyes darted to the sacred pups, who now stood with hackles slightly raised, ready to move if anyone reached for me. Then to the Omega section of the stands, where wolves were watching her with an intensity they had never directed at elders before. Then to Duarte, who waited, unreadable. At last, she bowed her head a fraction. "The trial of empathy is satisfied," she said grudgingly. "Lucia Velez has shown enough heart to proceed." The words hit me like a physical shock. Enough heart. Proceed. There would be more. But right now, all I felt was a strange combination of relief and dread. Alara let out a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh. Nilo swayed, eyes wet. His gaze drifted to me, confusion and hope colliding on his face. "What about them?" I asked before anyone could move. All attention swung back. Duarte's eyes rested on Alara and Nilo. He was quiet for a long breath. "Punishment stands," he said. "Alara of Frostfang is guilty of theft and attempted desertion. She will not walk free of consequence." His gaze hardened slightly. "But exile is set aside. She will be bound to the healer's wing for 3 winters. Under watch, under burden. Every breath her brother draws in that time will be tied to work she cannot walk away from." Alara's mouth parted. Whatever words she might have said tangled on her tongue. "Nilo," Duarte continued, "is placed under the care of the healer and her staff. His illness will be treated as resources allow. His loyalty will be judged by his actions, not his sister's mistakes." He looked directly at Alara. "If you truly stole to give him life," he said, his voice dropping into something softer that carried just as far, "then this is your chance to earn it instead." Laura's good eyes shone. She bowed her head, the motion jerky, tears mixing with dried blood. "Thank you," she rasped. It was not clear who she meant. Me, the king, the pups, all of us, none of us. Maybe it did not matter. The warriors released the ropes from the central post. One moved to drag Nilo away with a rough hand, but a warning growl from the nearest pup stopped him. He adjusted his grip, gentler this time. As they led the siblings toward the side gate, Nilo twisted to look back over his shoulder. Our eyes met for just a heartbeat. He gave a tiny, shaky nod. I swallowed hard, the knot in my throat almost painful. The sacred pups circled me again, forming their glowing ring. Their bodies pressed close, warmth seeping into my cold toes, my chilled calves. One of them, the little gray with the dusted ears, hopped up to bump its nose against my hand. I curled my fingers around its muzzle briefly, grateful for the solid, living weight. Above us, Duarte had resumed his place on the throne. To anyone else, he might have looked as composed and distant as before. But when I glanced up, his storm gray eyes found mine. For a moment, the noise of the crowd, the weight of the elders, the enormity of what had just happened, all fell away. There was only that gaze and the odd, unshakable sense that something in him recognized something in me. Not my face, not my name, but the way I could not stop caring about wolves no one else saw. The thread between us pulled tight, humming. Then he broke the connection, turning his head to address the circle, and the moment snapped. Elder Maris lifted her staff. "The trial of empathy is complete," she announced, voice carrying over the gathered wolves. Before the eyes of the sacred pups, the Alpha King, and the Frostfang pack, Lucia Velez has been tested in heart as well as mind. The words washed over me, heavy and unreal. I did not feel like a Luna. I felt like an Omega who had spoken too much truth and somehow not been struck down for it. But the pups at my feet seemed content, their eyes bright. Their bodies relaxed for the first time since dawn. I drew in a deep breath of cold air, let it fill my aching lungs, and tried to accept the impossible fact that in a single day I had stood in the center of the circle and protected a stranger branded as traitor and her shaking little brother. And the pack had watched and listened. Whatever came next, whether I shattered under the weight of these trials or somehow survived them, that would not be undone. By the time the trial of empathy ended and Alara and Nilo were led away, the light in the sky had shifted. The bright chill of morning had softened into a colder, thinner gray. Long shadows stretched across the stone circle as the stands began to empty. Wolves poured out in murmuring streams, their voices weaving questions and speculation that tangled in the air long after their bodies were gone. The elite she-wolves drifted away in clusters, armor glinting, whispers sharper than their blades. None of them came close to me. I stood where the sacred pups had left me, legs heavy, thoughts heavier. Frost had crept back over the edges of the ring, glittering faintly around my bare toes. My plain gray dress hung damp and wrinkled, smelling of smoke, stone, and fear. The pups themselves were oddly calm now. They settled around me in loose groups, some lying down with their heads on their paws, others sitting upright but relaxed, as if they trusted that for the first time today, nothing terrible was going to happen in the next heartbeat. I did not share their confidence. Elder Maris conferred with the other elders at the base of the platform, gesturing toward me more than once. I saw their heads shake, saw their eyes flick to the Alpha King seated above them. Whatever they wanted, they were not getting it. At last, Maris gave a small, stiff bow and stepped back. Duarte Calum rose from the throne. The few voices still lingering in the stands dropped to near silence. He descended the steps one at a time, cloak trailing behind him in a soft wave of dark fabric. The elders parted as he passed, some bowing their heads, others watching him with wary respect. He did not look at them. His eyes were on me. The pups stirred as he approached, but they did not growl or bare their teeth. They shifted just enough to leave a narrow path between us, like a corridor carved in fur. He stopped at the edge of their line. "Lucia Velez," he said. My heart stuttered. It sounded different. My name in his mouth, stripped of the contempt I had heard it said with so many times, shaped by a voice used to giving orders that were obeyed. I bowed my head awkwardly. "Your Majesty?" "You will walk with me," he said, not unkindly, but not as a request. Every part of me wanted to say no, to ask if I could crawl back into my tiny room and pretend this day had never happened. Pretend the pups were a strange dream and I was still invisible. Instead, I nodded. "Yes," I managed. He turned and moved toward one of the arched exits leading out of the circle, the one that opened onto the narrower, older paths that threaded through the inner part of the Frostfang territory. The pups flowed after him, then fell back to surround me again, as if escorting us both. We walked in silence at first. The sound of the crowd faded behind us, replaced by the softer noise of the pack ground settling. Distant clatter from the training yards, the faint ring of a hammer from the forge, the low murmur of voices from the dens. Above, the sky had started to gather thin, high clouds, the kind that meant the temperature would drop even lower at night. We left the main paths and took a lesser-used one that hugged the stone wall circling the heart of the territory. The wall rose tall and pale on one side, crusted with old ice. On the other side, the land sloped gently down toward the frost-stiff grasses and the dark, distant tree line. The silence stretched, thin and taut. I could feel him beside me without looking. His height, the breadth of his shoulders, the way his presence filled the space like a second, heavier atmosphere. The pups padded between us, ahead of us, behind us, their small bodies a moving constellation of silver-blue eyes. Finally, he spoke. "You have caused quite a stir today," he said. My first instinct was to apologize. "I did not mean to," I said quickly. "If you wish, I can withdraw from the trials. You can say the pups were confused, that the ritual was strained. I will not argue." We were far enough from the circle now that my voice did not echo. It fell into the cold air and vanished. He made a low sound that might have been a humorless laugh. "If I told the packs that the sacred pups were confused," he said, "every elder in the 5 realms would tear into my throat for blasphemy before sunset." I winced. "Then they were wrong," I tried. "Or they were tricked, or—" "They were not wrong," he interrupted. And this time I heard a faint edge in his tone, not directed at me, but at the idea itself. They never have been, and they are not easily tricked. I had no answer for that. We walked a few more steps. Frost cracked softly under our feet. The trial of wisdom, so he said after a moment. No one has mentioned omega roofs in that chamber before. The comment caught me off guard. I glanced at him, then away again fast when his eyes slid toward me. They leak, I muttered. In winter. It seemed relevant. It is relevant, he said, to those who live under them. He let the thought hang between us, and the trial of empathy you spoke against exile, against easy fear. You spoke for an omega who broke the law. Alara's choices started long before she touched the storeroom doors, I said, throat tight. Someone should have noticed. He was quiet for a few breaths. That someone was not you, he said at last. Yet you took the burden as if it were. I know what it feels like to ask for help until your voice goes hoarse, I said softly, and to be told there is nothing anyone can do, that you should be grateful for what little you have. Something in my tone made him turn his head more fully toward me. How old were you, he asked, when you learned to be grateful for scraps? The question cut deeper than I expected. I almost laughed, except there was nothing funny in it. Old enough to understand that omegas are not meant to ask why, I said. Only how high to stack the wood and how low to bow. The corners of his mouth tightened. And yet here you are, he murmured, asking why in front of the entire pack. That is your fault, I blurted before I could stop myself. And theirs. He arched a brow. Theirs? The pups, I said. If they had not circled my bed, I would have stayed invisible. They drag me into the circle. They watch every step I take. If this is some mistake, it started with them, not me. As if hearing themselves mentioned, a few of the pups glanced back, ears flicking. They do not make mistakes, he said again, more softly this time. We had reached a quieter stretch of path now. The wall beside us bore old carvings here, worn down by time and weather, faded sigils of the Frostfang crest, old territorial markings, symbols whose meanings had been lost even to gossip. Ahead, through a break in the stone, I saw where the land dipped sharply down into a darker, denser forest. The trees there were taller, their trunks twisted, branches clawing at the sky, even without leaves. I recognized it even before my mind supplied the name. Vale Sombrio, the Shadow Vale, the place omegas whispered about at night to scare each other into staying inside after dark. The place scouts spoke of in hushed tones after too much drink, remembering strange lights and colder winds and the feeling of being watched by something older than wolves. We were not going toward it, not yet, but just seeing that dark line of trees in the distance made my skin crawl. You know what that is, Duarte said quietly. Val Sombrio, I said, the haunted valley. He inclined his head, so the stories reach even the storage closets. Avoid the hollow trees, do not follow voices, I said, repeating the warning I had heard since childhood. If you see lights that move wrong, turn back. Good, Benim, he said, remember that. The way he said it made my stomach twist. We reached a narrow outcropping of rock where the wall turned sharply inward. Duarte stopped there, resting one hand lightly against the stone. Below us, the land dipped away, giving a clearer view of the valley. Mists clung to the low ground like old breath. For a moment, he was quiet. When he spoke again, his voice felt different, less like a king addressing a subject, more like a man remembering something that hurt. Do you know, he asked, how Frostfang came to rule this region? I blinked. History lessons had never reached the Omega Wing. I knew fragments, scattered like bones. There used to be another house, a greater one, long destroyed. A purge, fire, blood on snow. Only that there was a purge, I said slowly, and that the old rulers deserved it. The words came out flat. That was how they had been spoken when I heard them. Rehearsed, repeated, unexamined. He watched my face as if gauging how much I believed that. The Great Purge, he said, that is what they call it now, as if it were a disease that needed cutting out, as if that makes it clean. His gaze slid back toward the valley. Before Frostfang, he said, before the current lines of alphas, there was another house, the Celestial House. They ruled not just this pack, but the surrounding territories. Not through fear alone, though they had their share of that too. Through something older, a bond. I felt the thread of the conversation tighten. With the pups? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. He nodded once. The sacred pups did not appear for just anyone, he said. They are not mere omens. They are guardians. They were bound to the blood of the celestial line, to its luna, to its heirs. They chose them, protected them, tested them. My breath hitched. In those days, he went on, when a child of that line was born, the pups would appear within hours. Not always 200, of course. Sometimes only 3. Sometimes a dozen. But they would come. They would circle the cradle. They would look into the child's eyes and decide if that soul was fit to carry the weight of their house. And if the pups did not come, I asked. He looked at me then. Then there was no celestial heir, he said, no matter what the blood said. The pup nearest my foot nudged my ankle gently, as if reminding me it was still there. What happened to them, I asked, even though I knew the broad strokes, the way you know there is a cliff ahead without knowing how far down the drop goes. He was quiet for a few breaths, eyes distant. Power them, he said at last. Fear, the usual things. Other packs grew restless. Some believed the celestial house meddled too much in their affairs. Others lusted after the old magic, the bond with the pups, the favor of the veil. He nodded toward Veil Sombrio. They gathered, he said, allies who called themselves righteous, enemies who called themselves brave. They planned, they plotted. In one long winter night, they struck. His jaw tightened. The air seemed to grow colder around us. They attacked the celestial stronghold, he said, burned it, slaughtered everyone they could find with star marks on their skin, men, women, pups. The sacred pups refused to fight for either side. Some say they howled until the moon itself hid its face. Others say they vanished into the veil and would not answer to anyone for years. I swallowed hard, throat dry. And the celestial house, I asked. Gone, he said. So the stories say. Wiped out. Only ash and ruins left. No one ever found a living heir. He glanced down at my wrist. I suddenly felt very aware of the frayed leather bracelet there, of the way his gaze lingered on it. It was not a celestial insignia, just old leather in an ordinary knot. Still, my pulse quickened. After the purge, he continued, the territory needed leadership. Frostfang's ancestors stepped in. They took the pieces that were left. They made themselves kings instead of stewards. They told stories about why the purge was necessary, and over time, those stories became the truth everyone accepted. And you, I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Do you accept it? He studied me for a long moment. I accepted what I was taught, he said, until the war 5 years ago snapped more than one old story in half. There was something unreadable in his eyes when he said it, a shadow I did not have the right to touch. What does any of that have to do with me, I asked, even as something deep in my chest stirred uneasily. I am an Omega. I grew up scrubbing floors and carrying wood. No pups came to my cradle. He gave a short, mirthless huff. Are you certain? He asked. Yes, I said too quickly. I would have heard. Someone would have told me. The elders would have used me as a banner, not shoved me into a storage closet. There is nothing special in my blood. His gaze dropped to the pups at my feet. 200 sacred pups circled your bed at dawn, he said quietly. They knelt to you in the circle. They guard your every step and without being commanded. That has not happened, Lucia, not in this lifetime, not in my father's, not in my grandfather's. The world narrowed to the sound of my own breathing and the faint rustle of paws on frost. They made a mistake, I whispered. They do not make mistakes, he repeated, firm. We stood there, caught between past and present, between the crumbling old stories and the sharp new one unfolding under our feet. Finally, he straightened. Tomorrow, he said, the next trial begins. The words sank into me like stones dropped into deep water. Trial, I echoed. After today, there are more. He nodded. The trial of courage, he said. We will not hold it in stone halls or crowded circles. It will take place in Veil Sombrio. My stomach lurched. I looked down toward the valley at the twisted trees and clinging mist. Lone, I asked. No one enters the vale alone, he said quietly, but you will not have warriors at your back. You will have them. He gestured to the pups. They lifted their heads as if understanding. You will walk into the place where the oldest ghosts of this land still remember what was taken from them, he said. If there is any truth to the stories of the celestial house, if any thread of their fate still tangles with ours, you will find it there. A chill far colder than the wind slid down my spine. And if there is nothing, I asked. He looked toward the valley, eyes dark. Then you will walk and return, he said, and I will know that the pup's choice means something different than I thought. He did not say what he thought it meant now. He did not have to. The word air hung unspoken between us. He turned back toward the heart of the pack. Rest, he said. Eat. Try to sleep if you can. Tomorrow, before the sun reaches its highest point, the pups will come for you. He inclined his head, a gesture that felt too close to a bow for a king to give a rejected omega, then walked away, cloak whispering across the frost. The sacred pups pressed in around me, warm and silent. The leader, the dark one with the pale streak down its muzzle, lifted its gaze to mine. In its silver blue eyes, the reflection of the valley looked almost like a mouth waiting to open. I swallowed hard and started back toward the Omega Wing, the weight of old ghosts and new trials heavy on every step. Dawn came slower the next day. Or maybe it only felt that way because I had not slept much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the valley, saw the mist writhing between the trees, saw the memory of Duarte's expression when he spoke of the purge. Fear has a way of making hours stretch. When the pups came, they did not wake me with gentle nudges or soft breaths this time. They arrived like a tide pouring under the door, through the thin open window, filling every corner of the tiny room. I was already dressed, boots laced, hair pulled back into a simple braid. The plain gray dress had been traded for something sturdier, thicker fabric patched at the elbows, hem falling to my knees instead of my ankles. Someone had left it hanging on the inside of my door sometime during the short hours of night. No insignia this time, no shimmering thread, just a garment that would not rip the first time a branch grabbed it. The leader pup hopped up onto the end of the bed and stared at me. I suppose if I refuse, I said, you will simply drag me. Its ears flicked. It did not disagree. I exhaled, a gusty breath that did little to loosen the knot in my chest. All right, I said, let us go meet the ghosts. The pups led me through the corridors, through half-empty morning paths where wolves paused to stare, through a side gate I had never been allowed near before. The air outside the main walls bit harder, sharper, unfiltered by the warmth of packed bodies and smoke. We followed a narrow trail along the outer edge of the territory, snow-crusted grass crunching under my boots. The main pack grounds faded behind us, swallowed by the curve of the land. Ahead, the ground sloped down toward the darker line of trees. Vale Sombrio. Even its name felt like a draft under the skin. No cheering crowds waited at the valley's edge. No elders. No throne. Only Duarte, standing beside a weathered stone marker, etched with runes I could not read. He wore no cloak today, only a dark coat strapped at the chest, thick enough to keep out the wind. His hair was pulled back from his face, exposing the lines at the corners of his eyes, the faint scar along his jaw. He looked more like a warrior than a king. The council wanted warriors to accompany you, he said as we approached. Let me guess, I said. You refused. He inclined his head. The trial of courage is not meant to test how many swords you can stand behind, he said. It is meant to test how you stand when there is no one to swing them for you. I eyed the valley. The mist curled and shifted between the trees, thicker near the ground, thinning as it climbed. The trunks were pale, bark peeling in long curling strips that reminded me of old shed skins. And what if I do not stand at all, I asked, trying to sound lighter than I felt. What if I fall flat on my face at the border and refuse to move? Then we will know the answer to the question the trial asks, he said evenly. I made a face. That is a very kingly way to say you would fail me. He did not smile, but something in his gaze softened. I cannot walk with you, he said. The veil chooses who it will tolerate. Too many alphas have tried to bend it to their will. It remembers. Places remember? I asked. He looked past me toward the mist. This one does, he said. He reached into his coat and drew out a small object, closing his fist around it for a moment before holding it out to me. I hesitated, then extended my hand. He dropped the object into my palm. It was a simple thing at first glance. A small, flat stone, no bigger than a coin, drilled through the center so a leather cord could pass. The stone itself was dark, almost black, but when I turned it, faint threads of silver glimmered through it, like veins. "What is this?" I asked. "Old rock from the heart of the Vale," he said, "worn smooth by time. My father gave it to me when I first walked in. His father gave it to him. It will not protect you. But it may remind the Vale that you come with my sanction, not as an invader." "That does not sound as comforting as you think it does," I muttered. Still, I looped the cord over my head. The stone rested just above my heart, cold against my skin. "Walk where the pups lead," he said. "If you hear your name in a voice you recognize, do not answer unless you can see who speaks. If you see light that does not cast shadows, look away. If you feel something tug at your feet like deep water, move." This is a lot of "if you do not want to do not do this for a trial you are insisting I take," I said. He did not argue. "The veil will show you things," he said quietly. "Old echoes, new fears. It will test whether you run from them or through them. Somewhere in there lies something that belongs to it. If you can find it and carry it out, the trial is satisfied." "Something that belongs to it," I repeated. "You mean you do not even know what I am looking for?" His eyes met mine. "If I told you that he said, "But it would not be courage. It would be an errand." The pups had gathered at the edge of the tree line, paws on the first roots, waiting. Their eyes glowed brighter here as if the veil had turned up some hidden flame inside them. I swallowed hard, fingers closing once more around the stone at my chest. "All right," I said, "I will walk where they lead." He stepped aside, giving me a clear path forward. "Lucia," he said. I looked back. "If the veil shows you something that hurts," he said, his voice softer than the wind, "remember that it is a shadow, not the thing itself. You have already survived the real wounds once." The words lodged under my ribs. "Easy for you to say," I murmured. He held my gaze for one long, steady heartbeat. "No," he said, "it is not." Then he nodded to the pups. They surged forward, spilling between the trees. The moment my boots crossed the invisible line between open ground and veil, the temperature dropped. It was not just cold. The air itself felt thicker, heavier, as if I had stepped underwater. Sound changed too. The distant noises of the pack grounds vanished. The whisper of wind through branches took on a different tone, lower and more resonant, like a voice humming a note too low to hear but not too low to feel. The light dimmed, though the sky above remained the same dull gray. Shadows stretched longer here than they had any right to. The mist clung in patches, curling around my ankles, then releasing. The pups became pale flickers of motion ahead of me, their glowing eyes the brightest thing in sight. They did not hesitate. They wove a path between the trees with the surety of creatures who had run here 1,000 times and never lost their way. I followed. The deeper we went, the stranger the forest became. Trees grew closer together, their bark streaked with dark stains that had nothing to do with sap. Some trunks bore claw marks, long and deep, as if something massive had raked them. Others had symbols carved into them, circles within circles, lines crossing, dots in patterns that made my head ache to look at. The ground sloped gently downward, then up again, then dipped sharply in places where the mist pooled thicker. Once, my foot sank into something that looked like ordinary earth but felt like wet ash. I jerked back, heart pounding, and the pups paused, watching me until I found firmer ground. Time blurred. I did not know how long we walked. My breath puffed in front of me, but the cold had settled into something I could not even shiver against anymore. My fingers, wrapped around the stone at my chest, had gone numb. Then we reached the clearing. It opened without warning, the trees pulling back to reveal a circle of bare earth. No grass grew here. No roots broke the surface. The soil was the color of old bruises, dark and mottled. In the center of the clearing, a ring of stones stood like the stumps of ancient teeth. Between them, the air shimmered faintly, as if heat rose from a fire that was not there. The pups stopped at the edge of the ring. Their ears flattened. None of them crossed into the center. My steps slowed. The air above the bare earth shifted. Shapes coalesced. At first, they were only smudges, darker than the mist. Then slowly they sharpened. One by one, wolves took form, not in flesh and fur, but in light and shadow. Their bodies were translucent, the trees behind them faintly visible through their flanks. Their eyes glowed with the same silver-blue light as the pups, but deeper, older, threaded with something that felt like starlight dragged through water. Spectral wolves. Stories said they hunted the nightmares of pups and punished those who lied under oath. Stories said they were what was left of the celestial house's greatest protectors, bound to the veil when their bodies fell. They stepped forward, paws making no sound. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it hurt. Every instinct in me screamed to run, to back away, to bow my head, to avoid eye contact. Omegas did not stand at the center of anything. They kept to the edges, but the pups had stopped behind me. When I glanced back, they had formed a loose semicircle, hemming me in. They were not moving. This is the trial, I reminded myself. Courage, not the absence of fear. The choice to keep your feet pointed forward anyway. I forced myself to take another step toward the ring. One of the spectral wolves separated from the others. It was larger than the rest, its form more defined. Its fur, if it could be called fur, was not one solid color, but a shifting blend of silver and smoke, shot through with faint, moving lights, like stars flickering in a night sky. A crescent of brighter light marked its chest. It stopped just inside the circle of stones and looked at me. Everything else in the world narrowed to that gaze. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. No sound, no air, no thought. Just the sense of something vast and old, turning its full attention on a single small body. Then very softly, in a voice that was not spoken aloud but bloomed inside my mind like a memory, I heard words. Filha estelar, starborn daughter. My breath caught. I think you have the wrong girl, I whispered, though my lips did not feel like they were moving. The wolf's eyes did not blink. The voice came again. At last you return. Heat rushed up under my skin, not the warmth of fire, but the shock of recognition in a place that had always felt empty. I have never been here before, I said, and my voice shook now. I am Lucia Velez, Omega, rejected. I have no wolf, no star, no... The spectral wolf stepped forward. It did not snarl. It did not lower its head to threaten. Instead, it approached me the way a pup approaches a hand it has known since birth. When it reached the edge of the bare earth, it stopped again. Then it bowed, its front legs bent, its head dipped low, muzzle brushing the dark soil. Behind it, one by one, the other spectral wolves followed. A circle of light and shadow bowed to a girl who had spent most of her life trying to be small. My knees went weak. I would have fallen if the pups behind me had not stepped in. Warm bodies pressed against the backs of my legs, holding me upright. I could feel their breaths at my calves, their hearts racing almost as fast as mine. The voice in my mind softened. So far, it said, so lost. Still the thread held. I do not understand, I managed, tears stinging the corners of my eyes. If I am anything you think I am, why did no one come? Why did no one say? Images flickered at the edges of my vision, a tower wrapped in flame, a woman with star-silver hair cradling a child, a man shouting something I could not hear over the roar, snow stained with red, pups howling at a sky that had swallowed its moon. A small bundle passed from one pair of arms to another in a dark forest, the scent of fear thick as smoke. The images hurt. They sank their claws into places inside me I had not known existed. Then they were gone. The spectral wolf lifted its head. Not all threads break when you cut them, the voice said. Some go underground, some sleep, some wait. It glanced past me, toward the direction of the pack. Yours waited. I wiped at my face with my sleeve. my fingers clumsy. If I am, if I am of that house, I said, barely able to form the words, why do I have no wolf? Why did I never shift? Why did they call me broken? The wolves exchanged looks that were more felt than seen. You are bound, the voice said, not broken. Sleep buried sleep, fear buried truth, blood remembering pain buried song. My throat tightened. How do I unbind? I asked, though I was not sure I wanted the answer. If this was what being ordinary felt like, what would it be to carry what they hinted at? The spectral wolf stepped back, opening a space in the very center of the circle. There, on the bare earth, something shimmered. At first, I thought it was just a trick of light, a reflection of the glowing wolves on the ground. Then it grew clearer, lines formed. A shape took form, hovering just an inch above the soil. A pendant, silver, small. Shaped like a crescent moon cradling a star, I knew it. Not from my life where nothing that precious had ever passed through my hands. From stories whispered half understood, from the dress that had appeared in my trunk with that same symbol embroidered over the heart. The insignia of the celestial house. It gleamed, impossibly bright in the dim clearing, as if it had its own source of light. None of the wolves touched it. They stood very still, watching me. I took a step forward, then another. The air inside the circle felt different, thicker, as if I were walking through the last stubborn layer of water before breaking the surface. Each movement took effort, my muscles straining against something invisible. When I reached the pendant, the pressure grew sharper. It pressed against my skin, trying to push me back. Testing. I thought of turning away, of leaving it there, untouched, of walking back through the valley as the same girl who had entered it. Then I thought of the pups circling my bed, of Alara's bruised face and Nilo's cough, of Duarte's eyes when he spoke of the purge, of every time I had been told I was nothing, and the small, quiet part of me that had never fully believed it. I reached out and closed my fingers around the pendant. The world snapped. Light surged up my arm, not the blue-white of frost, but a blinding, silvery flare that seared through my nerves. It raced up to my shoulder, into my chest, my neck, my skull. For one terrible, impossible moment, I felt everything. Every breath of every wolf within the veil. The slow, patient heartbeat of the old trees. The memory of paws on snow in winters long gone. Of voices lifted in songs no one had sung in generations. The echo of a name that was mine and not mine. Then it collapsed. I doubled over, gasping, pendant clutched so tightly in my fist it bit into my palm. The light dimmed, drawing inward, settling somewhere behind my breastbone, like a coal dropped into a hollow. When I could straighten again, the spectral wolves were watching me with a focus that made my skin prickle. The lead wolf stepped closer, its head coming level with mine. You carry it, the voice said, the mark, the memory, the fracture. You will decide what to make of it. I looked down at my hand. The pendant lay cool and solid against my skin now, as if it had always been there. Its silver surface caught the faint light and bent it into something sharper. Will they see it? I asked, thinking of the elders, of the king. Outside the veil? The wolf's eyes flared. Those who still remember will, it said. Those who choose not to remember will pretend it is nothing. But the blood will know. A chill moved through me that had nothing to do with the air. What do you want from me? I whispered. The answer came like a wind through tall grass. To live, Filha Estelar, it said. To choose differently. To remember that a house is not only stone and crest, it is the way it holds those under its shadow. My vision blurred. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The spectral wolves bowed one last time. Then slowly they began to dissolve. Their forms thinned, streaks of light unraveling into the air. In moments, the clearing held nothing but me, the bare earth, the ring of stones, and the silent pups. The pendant lay heavy at my throat. The leader pup barked once, sharply. The sound jolted me back into my body. It trotted toward the edge of the clearing, pausing to glance back at me. Time to go. My legs felt unsteady, but they held. I followed the pups back through the trees. The walk out of the veil felt both shorter and longer. The path wound in ways I did not recognize. We passed the same clawed trees, the same patches of thick mist, but they looked different now. Less like teeth waiting to close, more like scars that had finally been acknowledged. When we reached the boundary, the air thinned. Sound changed. Distantly, I heard voices again. The faint clang of metal from the training yards, the murmur of a pack going about its day. I stepped out of the shadow of the last twisted tree. The cold, ordinary light of Frostfang hit my face. Duarte stood where I had left him at the stone marker. His body was tense in a way I recognized now from the elders whenever they waited for a verdict. When he saw me, some of that tension eased. "You returned," he said. "I did," I answered. His gaze swept over me quickly, searching for wounds, fractures. Finding none, his eyes dropped to my chest. The pendant lay against the sternum of my dress, catching the light. For a moment, his expression stripped bare. Shock, recognition, something like grief. He stepped forward without seeming to realize it, as if some invisible force had tugged him closer. "Where did you get that?" he asked, voice rougher than before. "In the Vale," I said. "In a clearing. It was—" I swallowed. "It was waiting." He reached out, then stopped, hand hovering a breath away from the pendant. "May I?" he asked. The small courtesy from a king to an Omega who might not be an Omega anymore almost undid me. I nodded. His fingers brushed the silver. A faint crackle of energy leaped between the metal and his skin. He flinched, eyes widening, then grabbed it, holding it up to see more clearly. The crescent moon cradling a star gleamed in the weak daylight. "I have seen drawings," he murmured, "carvings, old banners in ruins, but never—" His voice trailed off. He looked up at me, something like awe and dread warring in his gaze. "It answered you," and he said, "the veil answered you." I thought of the spectral wolves bowing, of the voice calling me Filha Estelar. "Yes," I said. He let the pendant fall back against my chest. His hand lingered a moment longer, not quite touching me, then dropped. "The elders will want to see this," he said, mask sliding back into place. "The pack will need to hear what happened." My stomach twisted. "I do not know if I can explain it," I admitted. "Not in words they will accept." It felt like standing in the middle of other people's memories while they poured themselves through me. "That is the most accurate description of the veil I have ever heard," he said quietly. We stood there for a few breaths, the space between us buzzing with things unsaid. Then he straightened fully. "The trial of courage is complete," he said. "You walked into the veil and returned. You faced what waited there. Whether the elders like it or not, they will have to accept that." He turned back toward the pack grounds. "Come," he said. "It is time to show them what the past left in your hands." The circle was full again. Word had spread faster than any messenger. Wolves packed the stands, crushed thick now, bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder. The murmurs were louder this time, the air charged with a different kind of anticipation. They knew I had walked into Valley Sombrio. They knew I had come back. They did not know what I had brought with me. The sacred pups trotted at my heels as we entered through the same arch as before. They were almost vibrating with energy now, their eyes brighter than ever. A few let out short, excited yips that bounced off the stone. The elders sat in their semicircle, cloaks drawn tight, faces stiff. Elder Maurice looked as if she had aged another 10 years since yesterday. Her gaze darted between me and Duarte, suspicion and fear tangled in equal measure. Duarte climbed the steps to the throne and took his seat. "Let the trial of courage be accounted," he said, voice carrying easily. "Lucia Velez entered Valle Sombrio under the watch of the sacred pups. She returns now to stand before us." The crowd murmured, eyes tracking me as I stepped into the center of the circle. I felt the pendant pulse once against my chest as if aware of the attention. Maris lifted her staff. "Did you encounter spirits?" she asked. "Did you flee? Did you hide? Did you find anything at all, or did you simply walk and return?" My mouth was dry. I could feel thousands of eyes on the small piece of silver lying against my dress. "I encountered wolves," I said. "Not like any I have ever seen. Light and shadow. Old." They bowed. A collective intake of breath shuddered through the stands. Spectral wolves, one elder demanded. They bowed to you? The words felt ridiculous, arrogant, even as I spoke them. Yes, I said. A younger warrior in the stands laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. Ghost stories, he called. Anyone can claim the veil bowed if no one else was there to see. Enough, Mara snapped, but the doubt was already spreading. My hand moved almost of its own accord. I reached up and lifted the pendant into view. The light caught it. The symbol flashed. Silence fell so hard it stung. For a moment, no one moved. Then a sound like a choked sob broke from one of the oldest elders. He pushed himself to his feet, joints protesting, and leaned forward. Impossible, he whispered. That crest. It was burned. All of it was burned. Duarte's eyes had not left my chest. He rose from the throne without seeming to decide to do so. Every motion was slow, controlled, but I could feel the strain under the surface. Lucia, he said, voice low. Tell them what that is. The wolves in the veil called me Filha Estelar, I said, my own voice shaking. They showed me pieces, fire, blood on snow, a woman with this mark over her heart. They said this belonged to their house. The celestial house, the word celestial hit the circle like a thrown spear. Gasps, shouts. A few wolves flinched physically, as if I had invoked something cursed. Blasphemy, one elder hissed. The celestial line is dead. Dead, another agreed. Wiped out for their arrogance. Then why, Duarte said, his voice cutting through the noise, does their insignia lie on the chest of this Omega? He descended the steps, his gaze sweeping the elders before landing on the oldest among them, the one who had recognized the crest. You were there, Duarte said. As a child, perhaps, but you saw more of the purge than any of us. Tell me if this is a forgery. The elder's hands trembled as he beckoned me closer. My feet moved without my permission. He reached out, gnarled fingers brushing the pendant as if afraid it would vanish. His eyes closed, his lips moved silently, as if repeating a chant. When he opened his eyes, they shone with something like terror and relief. It is real, he said hoarsely. The weight, the lines, even the cold. I held one like it once. Before the fires, before... His voice broke. Mara shook her head as if trying to dislodge what she was seeing. Even if it is real, she said sharply, it proves nothing. A cursed trinket could have survived the flames. Someone could have found it in the ruins and hidden it. This girl could have stumbled across it in the veil. That does not make her... The pups, another elder interrupted, voice shaking. The pups chose her. 200 of them. They have not gathered like that since... He trailed off under Duarte's gaze. Since, Duarte prompted. Since the last heir of the celestial house was presented, the elder whispered. They circled the cradle. They bowed, just as they did today. My heart thudded so hard I heard it in my ears. No, I said, even as something inside me leaned toward the words. I am not. I cannot. If I were of that line, someone would have known. My parents... Who are your parents, Lucia? Duarte asked, his tone gentle, but unyielding. My mother was an Omega, I said. Her name was Anna. She disappeared when I was young. My father, I never knew him. The elders said he was no one, a traveler, a mistake. The oldest elder flinched. What did she look like? He asked. Your mother, I swallowed. Buck hair, I said, like mine. Eyes, brown, but when she was angry, or when she thought no one was watching, they looked lighter, like there was something bright behind them she refused to show. Any marks? Duarte pressed. Birthmarks, scars, anything unusual. I hesitated, then nodded. She had a pattern on her back, I said. I saw it once when she thought I was asleep. It looked like someone had spilled light on her shoulder blades. Tiny pale dots in the shape of a crescent. The elders told her to keep it covered. They called it an omen of bad luck. The oldest elder made a broken sound. Stars, he whispered. They called them star birthmarks. The celestial line carried them. The ground under me seemed to tilt. My fingers clenched around the pendant until the edges bit my skin. No, I said, more to myself than to them. I am an Omega. I have no wolf. I was rejected. I am nothing. As if in answer, the warmth behind my breastbone flared. It spread through my chest, down my spine, into my hands and feet. Not the sudden lightning strike of panic, but a steady rising heat, like a long frozen river finally cracking and rushing free under spring melt. My vision blurred at the edges, sound warped. The pups reacted first. They rushed in, surrounding me, bodies pressed tight. Their eyes blazed brighter, casting light onto the stones beneath our feet. Some began to howl, not in fear, but in a note that rose and rose, threading itself into something that sounded like a welcome. I stumbled, dropping to one knee. My skin burned from the inside. Every nerve lit up. My heartbeat thundered so loudly I thought my ribs would crack. I heard someone shout my name. Duarte, maybe, or an elder, or my own voice in my head calling myself back. Then something inside me broke. Not like a bone snapping, like a lock giving way. A howl ripped free from my throat. It did not sound human. It was deeper, layered, threaded with a resonance that vibrated the stones. It rose and soared and split the sky inside my skull, scattering every lie I had ever been told about who I was. Heat poured down my limbs. My fingers spasmed, bones shifting under skin. Pain lanced bright and sharp through my joints, my spine, my jaw. I collapsed fully onto my hands and knees, panting, as my body reshaped itself from the inside. I had watched other wolves shift from a distance. I had heard their bones crack, seen fur ripple over skin, listened to the raw cries of the first transformation. I had never known what it felt like. I had thought I never would. It felt like being torn apart and remade out of light. The world shrank to the sound of my own ragged breaths, the snap and grind of changing bones, the roaring in my ears. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it was over. Silence fell. I stood, but not on two legs. The ground under my paws felt different, more detailed, more alive. Every grain of frost, every groove in the stone registered through the pads of my feet. The air tasted sharper, layered with scents I had never been able to separate before. Fear sour, excitement bright, the deep grounding smell of the earth itself. I lifted my head. Gasps and cries rippled through the stands. In the reflection of 1,000 stunned eyes, I saw myself. Not the thin, plain Omega in a gray dress. A wolf. My fur was not the mottled brown or gray of most frostfang wolves. It was a deep silver blue, the color of night just before dawn, when the stars are still stubbornly clinging to the sky. Lighter markings traced along my flanks and shoulders, delicate swirling patterns that looked almost like constellations. My paws shone faintly where they touched the ground, as if I had stepped through starlight, and it had refused to let go. Along my spine and across my brow, small points of brighter light glimmered beneath the fur. Tiny stars, moving, shifting, never quite in the same place twice. The sacred pups howled, a chorus of joy. Above us, on the edges of the circle, a faint shimmer appeared. Spectral wolves, audiobook, not as solid as they had been in the veil, but present, outlines of light and shadow, eyes glowing, bodies ringed around the top tiers of the stands. They looked down on the circle, on me, on the pack, like judges and witnesses both. The oldest elder dropped to his knees. "The celestial wolf," he breathed. "The lie, it lives." One by one, wolves in the stands followed. Some knelt slowly, awestruck. Others dropped as if their legs had been cut from under them by the weight of what they were seeing. A few fought it, jaws clenched, but something old and deep in their blood pulled them down anyway. The elite she-wolves, shining in their armor, lowered their heads. Elder Maris resisted the longest. Her eyes burned with fear, with anger, with the desperate clinging to a world that made sense. But the spectral wolves above shifted, their gaze fixing on her, and her shoulders sagged. She knelt. Only one figure remained standing in the circle, Duarte Calum. He stood very still, cloak stirring in the faint wind, eyes locked on mine. In them, I saw not just recognition now, not just confusion. I saw something like wonder, like relief, sharp enough to hurt. Slowly he descended the steps, each footfall measured, echoing in the silence. The pups parted to let him through, then closed in behind, forming a living boundary around us. He stopped a short distance in front of me. For a moment he did not speak. He simply looked, at the star marks along my sides, at the glow beneath my fur, at the pendant still resting at my throat, the chain tangled in the rough, at the eyes that I knew without having seen them were no longer plain brown, but some mirrored reflection of the pup's silver blue. "I thought your line was ash," he said quietly. "I was told there were no survivors, that the purge had done what it set out to do." He took a breath. "They were wrong," he said. The words settled over the circle like a new law. He moved closer, slow enough that I could step back if I wanted to. I did not. Up close, I could smell him more clearly. Winter wind, dark fur, steel, and underneath it all, something like thunder held in check. "Lucia Valle," he said, and there was so much in the way he shaped the name now. Omega, outcast, and something far older. He lifted a hand, finger spread, and held it out, palm up, an offering instead of a command. "If the sacred pups and the veil and the blood we have all tried to forget agree," he said, voice low enough now that the words were almost just for me, "then I would be a fool to argue." He stepped closer, reducing the last inch of space between his hand and my muzzle. "My Luna," he whispered, the words tremoring with something that sounded like relief and awe and a little fear. "My queen." The title settled over my fur, over my bones, over the strange blazing light inside me. For the first time in my life, when someone tried to name me, the names did not feel like ill-fitting cloaks sewn for someone else. They felt like doors opening. Around us, the pack knelt, heads bowed. Above us, the spectral wolves raised their heads and howled, a sound that twined with the sacred pups' voices and the strange fierce song rising from my own chest. The stars on my fur burned brighter, and somewhere deep inside, the last lock on my bloodline's memory shattered, letting the future pour in.